there's real turmoil on the Tory side about this. And, Mr. Holden is the chairman of the party, and if he's going around upsetting his party workers
and
like
reducing
this,
the list of candidates for a seat to one to just himself.
yeah, it doesn't, it doesn't go down very well, and it doesn't bode very well about the morale in the Tory camp, which I think did kick up a bit after last night's debate.
And looking tonight, actually, at what lessons can be thrown forward for that debate involving all seven parties on Friday night, not including, of course, both Starmer and Sunak. And then, of course, what lessons you can carry over to next week as well, personally, for Sunak and Starmer. So we'll have lots more chat about that. And we'll actually speak to Jill Rutter in a little while about the £2,000 claim. I've just nicknamed last night's TV debate the £2,000 debate because that is what has landed.
Oh, you won't please the Labour Party, because they
Well, I
say,
won't.
even if it's not true, every time you say the word £2,000, it goes into people's minds.
Well, it does, and it has. So too late. You've got some news on Richard Holden as well. There's all sorts of upset about Richard Holden and the safe seat that he's been parachuted into.
Now, Richard Holden, not a very well-known MP outside Westminster, was made party chairman. The problem he had was that his seat in Durham was disappearing in the boundary changes. So while being party chairman, the attack dog for the party, he's been looking for a seat. And I have to say, morale and anger in the Tory party is pretty high. He tried to move himself into a seat in Suffolk, and as was reported in today's Times, Tom Hunt there basically suggested he move into a neighbouring seat, which would leave the safer seat for Rick Holden. He refused to do that, but said he was so angry that he's considering joining Reform. Mr. Holden has then moved on to Essex, and he has got the seat in Billericay, but at the price of two members of the Conservative Association and local councillors saying his appointment has gone down like a cup of cold sick, that he's not a local man, that they could have filled this seat at any time in the last 6 months because John Barron is standing down, and that they're not going to campaign for him. So, we've covered a lot of turmoil about Diane Abbott.
Yeah.
Incidentally, some bad news. It looks like the Labour, or the left-wing vote, is going to be split in Ian Duncan Smith's constituency because Faiza Shahid has said that she's going to stand as an independent. That may take some votes away from Labour. So there's turmoil on the Labour side, but there's real turmoil on the Tory side about this. And Mr. Holden is the chairman of the party, and if he's going around upsetting his party workers
and
like
reducing
this,
the list of candidates for a seat to one to just himself.
Yeah, it doesn't, it doesn't go down very well, and it doesn't bode very well about the morale in the Tory camp, which I think did kick up a bit after last night's debate.
The Tories on 19% and Reform UK on 17%, the Lib Dems on 10% and the Greens on 7%. Let's come to you, Siobhan, because this obviously is an indication of how the arrival of Nigel Farage is digging into the Conservative vote.
Is it? Now, we all love the polls. We get very excited when there's a new one, especially when there's a new model. It's like, oh my gosh, all the turkeys have come for Christmas and we're in. But actually, what you know when you knock on doors is how many people aren't really engaged yet in the election, aren't really sure of how they're going to vote, sadly, if they are going to be voting at all. So is this really representative? We honestly don't know. It is a snapshot in time, and particularly as it came out on Monday and Tuesday, I think is when they were doing the polling, when Nigel Farage was all over the news. He was the newest thing in it. So quite frankly, it's that moment, but it doesn't tell us anything about what's going to happen on the 4th of July.
Well, in terms of whether it cuts into the Conservative vote, I'll give you the full context. The Conservatives are down 2, Reform is up 2. Labour's down 6, Lib Dems are up 2. So that's the full context. Yasmin, come in on this. I mean, for someone who probably isn't a Nigel Farage fan, but probably isn't a Conservative Party fan either. I'm just making that assumption based on our prior conversations. Correct me if I'm wrong, please do. What do you think about Nigel Farage and the effect on the Conservative vote?
I think Siobhan is absolutely right. And you're right too, that, I have never been sympathetic to the Tories, and I actually loathe Nigel Farage. But I think this is something we all have to think about. And I did a tweet yesterday. Forgive this voice, I've got the lurgy.
Oh, bless you. Well, thank you
And
for
I
being with
said,
us.
you know, the ridiculous and dangerous way the media's and some Tories and Farage's devotees are treating Nigel Farage as if he's Christ come back to save his flock. And the amount of attention and uncritical, kind of exciting coverage of this man who has no official position in our political party is deeply alarming. And I will agree with Siobhan that that is partly responsible. When you buzz somebody up like this, of course, in the immediate aftermath, there is this, oh yes, this is the person who's going to take us to heaven again after he didn't, thanks to Brexit. So that's my first point. And the second point is that much as I have been critical of the Tory party, they are part of the a kind of world one can engage with, one can argue with. I still don't know what reform stands for, except let's keep out the outsiders because they're the ones who are destroying our country.
Look, are we in danger of disregarding those people in our bafflement at Nigel Farage and the amount of focus that the media give him? Are we in danger of disregarding, disrespecting those voters who do chime with his beliefs, who would like to vote reform, who are interested in Nigel Farage? And look, it's just a very, very small sample, but when he had his campaign launch in Clacton yesterday, Tuesday, a huge amount of people turned out. And I know that's just one event, but we were taken aback. Our reporter was taken aback yesterday at the numbers of people who flocked to Nigel Farage. And they're not people who've been wowed by the media. They're people who agree with Nigel Farage and want to show him their support, Siobhan.
I think that it's always important to remember we don't know why each individual votes for who they do, supports for who they do. I think one of the things that was very clear when all of the analysis was done after the referendum was that there were so many different reasons why people either felt that they weren't being heard or they had a very specific ideological reason for how they voted. And what you can do, and especially someone who has a platform like Nigel Farage, because look, we are still giving him a platform by giving all of our time to him right now.
But he is attracting voters. He's
But
there
it's-
is
yeah.
there are very wealthy people who are voting for him. There are people who agree with him on immigration and much, much more. And we shouldn't belittle voters like that at all. We should respect the fact that they agree and align with Reform UK and Nigel Farage. There's nothing wrong with that.
We should respect every single voter, and in fact, because it's both a right and a responsibility and obligation of all of us. We are really fortunate to live in a democracy, and one of the most important things about that is that there are a range of views which are heard and respected. Doesn't mean we always like it, but that must be heard and respected. And if you've got a home, that's great. But seeing a lot of people turn out to one event doesn't actually tell you how people are going to vote. We don't know, I don't know where those people came from. You know, they could have travelled far and wide, for example.
Look, I was happy to point out it's just a snapshot. It's just a snapshot, but it's certainly worth thinking
Can
about.
I come in on that?
Yes, please, Yasmin,
Kate?
come in.
Because one of the things, I absolutely cling to my idea that one reason he's kind of the political pop star is because we, the media, have made him so. Why don't we, how many people in this country sincerely and deeply believe in the Green Party? When do they get any attention? Their events are very well attended. I've been to some of them, but they're not deliberately created to excite and enrage the crowds. And I think we all need to ask ourselves, actually, from where I stand, in one way, I'm really thrilled that reform is doing well, which means Tories are even more kind of in trouble than they were. But I don't think that's right. I think we are distorting the picture. It's not
Okay.
about disrespecting the voters. It's about distorting.
It's about, yeah, okay. Well, look, Sarah's been in touch. She says Tory Reform Group is exactly what is wrong with the Conservatives and must take the blame for where Farage is now. The Wets have ruined the Conservatives, Siobhan.
Well, that's your opinion, Sarah, and one I wholeheartedly disagree with. I would say actually that, you win from the centre. That's where you've got the most balance, where you have a vision and you put that into action, which is, for the benefit and at the best of the whole of the United Kingdom and is representative of that. From the centre right is where we have had the most success also as the Conservative Party. We are really pleased to celebrate next year our 50th anniversary. So we've obviously not been doing something so wrong for the last 50 years as a core component of the Conservative Party.
Is there any argument that the right of the Conservative Party needs to be brought into the conversation a little bit more, so that there is a home there for people who now might be gravitating towards reform because of some of their views?
I think that one of the beauties of the Conservative Party is that it is a broad church. If you go to Conservative Party conference, for example, you will see that there are a range of views within the party, all being equally heard. There's a mass of fringe events, and it's about, as leadership, bringing all of that in and also thinking and representing the country and where we should be going all the time. So that's, really at the core and at the forefront.
Yeah.
And, by being in the centre and leading from that position, hearing everyone and trying to strike the right balance is where you get the success for the United Kingdom.
The suggestion, Yasmin, has been, and there were words nodding to this, not explicit words, but there was an understanding in what Nigel Farage was saying in his campaign launch yesterday that he has his eyes on the Conservative Party. He feels that the Conservative Party could be swallowed up into the Reform Party, and that actually. I'm just throwing it out there to you, and just asking whether the future of the party is in danger here.
What he's done is disrupt. He did it with Brexit, and now he's doing it with our present right of centre politics. And he's got nothing to offer but disruption. And I don't agree that the right has somehow been excluded from the current Tory party at all. It hasn't been a centre right party. When you have somebody like Suella Braverman saying and doing what she does, and people saying, oh, they're not as right-wing as the Reform leader, how far right do you want this party to go? I mean, Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, so many others in the party drifted in that direction, and it's still not enough. It will never be enough for Nigel Farage.
So is sorting out immigration, just devil's advocate here, Yasmin, is sorting out immigration, that is the main policy, that is what we're hearing from Reform. Net zero immigration is one of their pledges. Is that far right? Is that leaning too much to?
Of course it is. Of course it is far. They all know. Look, I came here in 1972, and you've probably heard me say this. In 1964, 65, 66, there was full employment, and immigrants were really wanted, right? Everybody was, including the Tories, were reaching out for people to come and work here. And the same conversation was going on. We've lost control of our borders. There are too many of them here. When we came here, it was the same conversation. I want to know what Nigel Farage is actually going to do. What is the policy?
Yeah, but even Labour are talking about reducing.
Oh, don't get me onto that.
No, but I mean,
don't get me onto
I'm just
that.
saying, immigration. It doesn't.
But it always is, Kate. But I do not know one decade
I don't agree.
when it hasn't been.
I don't agree. So Reform are saying they want net zero migration, which is same amount in as out, in and out. So it's not banning people from coming to this country. It's just saying whoever.
Good luck to them.
Well,
Good luck to
okay,
them.
and there are various economic arguments as to why people might not think that that's a good idea. Okay, in terms of productivity, in terms of filling vacancies,
And our National Health
etc.,
Service, let me
etc. But
tell you.
every single, well, certainly Labour's also talking about the issue we have with too high levels of net migration, and shouldn't there be more, as the Conservatives have started doing, shouldn't there be more controls on, family
All I'm
visas?
saying is, Kate, if this was a new thing, I would even bother to think about it. But for as long
You
as
think it's
I
the same
have been
old?
here, 50 years, this has been the conversation. They need us, but they don't want us. That's
Okay.
always been the deal.